وَاللَّامُ أَدْنَاهَا لِمُنْتَهَاهَا. And lam is from its closest part of the edge to the tip of the edge. The tip of it meaning the edge. Okay. So articulation of lam from the nearest part of both edges of the tongue to the almost tip of the tongue, and what lies opposite of them of the upper palate. Okay. That is basically the gums of the teeth. Okay. Now here you can see it visually, and note that it's from the side. Okay, from the nearest part of the side, which is this side and this side, not just the top, not just that. So it's all of that. Okay. Common mistake is that we only use the tip of a tongue for lam in English mostly. I've seen that. La, 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 la. Not la, l, la, la, l, la, la. Al, not al, for full part. Lam also has something called inhiraf, which means that um, it means drifting of the air around the tongue. Okay, the air around the tongue. There's the air goes around the tongue due to lam being lifted and the sound being blocked partially by that much of the tongue. If that much of the tongue is not lifted, there's not much drifting happening. You can't hear it. Okay, but if there's more of the tongue being blocking the air, then the air will drift around in the manner that was described for lam, which is a quality of the lam, which we'll learn later on. Okay, so just make sure that when you're practicing, make sure you lift all of that, all of the side from the side, or from one side to the other side. Okay. Difference between heavy and light lam. When do you pronounce light lam? All the time, except for Allah's name. So when do you pronounce heavy lam? Heavy lam is only in Allah's name. Okay, there's only one type of lamb that's heavy. That is the lamb of Allah. Allah, Allah. Okay. Now, of course, just like all the other letters that are heavy, lamb that is heavy will have a curvature in the middle of the tongue. Okay, the middle of the tongue is curved. Okay, just like okay, l, l, and so okay, l, l. You see how it curved? L, l. See how it's curving? Okay, moves forward because of the curvature going down. Okay, good. نون والنون من طرفه تحت جعل. Okay. I'm gonna do noon because and ra as well after because lam, noon, and ra they're all from the same place. Not exactly the same makhraj, and in Imam al-Jazri's work he makes it separate makharij. However, in some opinions they're actually the same makhraj point. And they're very, very, very close together. So we do them one after the other, inshallah. Noon is from the tip of the tongue, okay, with what lies opposite to it of the gums, a little below the articulation of lam, i.e., more towards the front of the mouth. Okay, it's accompanied by ghunna from the khayshum. So noon always has ghunna. If I block the nose, there's no sound because the sound is coming out of the nose. What happens is the sound goes into the mouth, gets blocked by the tongue because the tongue is up. It gets blocked, comes back, and goes in through the nose. And some of it might go through nose automatically, just like as it shows here. Look, goes forward, blocked, goes forward and out. Okay. The scholars call the tongue part of Nun, lifting the tongue. They call that the completed half, because it has to be completed by the sound of the nasal cavity. And so the nasal cavity part is called completing half. Okay, right. Now, articulation of Ra. Ra is from the tip of the tongue as well. And remember the tip is this, look. Okay, that is the tip of the tongue. Okay, very small part of the tongue. With what lies opposite of the gums, close to the articulation of Nun? Lam, Ra, and Noon. Okay, N, R, L. Okay, Ra is just behind Nun. Okay, Lam, Ra, Noon. Very close to it. Okay, so Ra is a very interesting letter because it's got something called takrir. Takrir is that repetition sound they hear, the trilling sound, that sound. And a common mistake is that a lot of people let the trilling or repetition go on and on and on. That's wrong because that is making multiple letters of Ra at the same time. And it's not natural to the ears to hear that as a letter. It just sounds like a sound. It's not a letter. So that's why at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when they had the Prophet ﷺ, the proper Ra, they had one trill, and to get that one trill, they locked the tongue into the gums. How? With the side of the tongue. Not the side like this, but the side of the tip. So if you look at the tip, there's a tip of the tongue. Okay? There's a tip of the tongue. And the sides of that tip, okay, that is going to anchor onto the gums. And it will leave a hole in the middle. See that hole? Just like this. See that? That that will go up like that. Okay. We'll leave a small hole, and the sides of the tip will anchor on top. What that does is, when the air passes through, if we look back at the first example, when ra, the ra keeps coming and keeps trilling, that's because there is no hole, right? And the air, when it goes, it pushes it forward fully. Then the tongue comes back, and it gets pushed fully again, and it keeps happening. However, to stop that, when you have the hole there, right, that hole allows the air to pass through it and out. So therefore, there's no reason for the tongue to go forward again, and the anchoring is happening too when these parts of the tongue, right? These parts of the anchoring, there's a hole there. There's no reason for the tongue to go out fully and come back because there's a hole for the air, so the air it didn't push the tongue forward. Okay. So how is that happening? Ra comes, first repetition happens while the tongue is fully on. Then after that repetition, the hole is made quickly and you anchor the tongue. R, 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 R. Okay, R. And there's two sounds now you can see. There's a trill sound and the sound after it of the anchoring. R, 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 Okay, r. That is the ra sound. So here is a visual representation of ra and the hole that is there when pronouncing it, without which the articulation would be locked completely, meaning it will be locked in trilling. It will be locked in a constant repetition. Okay, which would result in the forbidden repetition. Okay, so to get rid of that, you have the hole there. Now, ra also, just like lam, has heaviness in it, and also light. So note that first of all, it's opposite to lam. Lam is always light except for one case, which is Allah's name. Ra is always heavy except for one case, when it's affected by ya or kasra in a way, in some way, in whatever way is shown. For example, if ra has kasra itself, that would be light, ri, ri, ri. If ra was sukoon, but it was followed by a kasra letter, ir, that's light, okay, etc., etc. Okay. Now, ra, heavy, has a curvature in the tongue again. And that is every other case. Every case, except for when it's affected by kasra. So if it has fatha, ra, heavy. If it has dhamma, ru, heavy. Okay. If it has sukoon, followed by what? A dhamma or fatha, then it's heavy. Ur, okay. That's the main uh, main way to pronounce ra is heaviness. Okay. Okay. So that's all really. Bismillah.